Hello, it's Dan Douthart. I'm a member of the Gwinnett Woodworkers. You may have seen some of the other YouTube videos that I've done, which have all been turning related. So I primarily do turning nowadays. I do some other woodworking stuff, but primarily everything I do now is something related on the lathe. Last month I came in to run the camera for the Scroll Saw Special Interest Group, and they have a boomerang box where somebody has made something scroll sawed item, and then they pass out tickets, and whoever's ticket is drawn gets what's ever in the box, and your responsibility then is to bring something back in the box next month. Well, Hans, the scrolling SIG chairman, gave me a ticket with no option to decline, and then he proceeded to draw my number. So I got what was in the box, and then I had to come up with something to bring back next month. Well, the topic that month was Christmas in July, where it was all sorts of scroll sawed Christmas ornaments. And there was some that were called 3D bulb ornaments. Some patterns had been published in Scroll Saw magazine. Several people had done those, and I thought, well, those look nice, but I think I'd like them better without those square corners, and finish the outside profile on the lathe. So I proceeded to do that. I started out using some of the Hans gave me some of the example patterns that he had, and those patterns that were published were meant to be folded on a piece of solid block of wood that measured 1 3/4 inch cross section. So I used that same pattern, starting out with a 1 3/4 inch block of wood, and I scroll sawed the internal bits, and then I put it on the lathe to turn the outside bits. Well, in order to get the flats on the block, in order to turn the block down to where the flat sides are gone, or to where it's completely rounded, the bits on the outer part of the pattern here were turned away. There's nothing left. So I decided that I needed to go to a larger size block of wood that would allow me to turn it down, get it round, and retain those outer portions of the block. Well, what I found was I needed to go to about a 2 1/4 inch size block of wood. Well, my scroll saw just did not like cutting that thickness of wood. So I decided, well, I'll need to do something else, and I tried cutting the existing patterns apart. The existing patterns did not have a center line, so it was hard to position it accurately, and then the scroll saw just didn't want to cut that thickness. And then I remembered some other stuff that I'd done with inside-out ornaments, where instead of using a solid block of wood, I'd started out with quarters. I'd quartered the block into smaller pieces. And that's what I decided to do, was just to try using quarter blocks, and such in this example here. Instead of having a cross section like that, I split it up into smaller pieces, and then I treated each piece individually as a quarter, and then once it was scroll sawed, then I permanently fastened it together to either finish. Well, I would cut the profile if I was doing it on a scroll saw, or I'd glue it together and do the turning. So that we've got a series of videos here related to this project, and I've got a paper. If you're interested in the paper, it covers the pattern making that I did, the scroll sawing, and the turning. And in doing that, this is the basic pattern that I came up with. And this would be the original style of pattern that is meant to be folded on a 1 3/4 inch block of wood. But since I went to this form here of splitting it up into quarters, I no longer could use that pattern. So I came up with this format here, where I printed out 4 copies of the pattern with a center line to cut. And then what I would do is I would put half the pattern on this piece and half the pattern on this piece, and do it on all 4 blocks of wood. And then in doing that, I came up with some other patterns. This is another pattern here that can be used for, these patterns can be used for either complete, this would be used if you're just going to completely scroll saw it. If you wanted to either turn or scroll saw the complete pattern, you could use that same pattern for both scroll sawing application and the turning final profile. And then this is another pattern that I came up with that I thought was a little bit different. And it produces an ornament like this. Go back to that first pattern that we discussed. It gives you an ornament like this. And then imagine you're being, I didn't bring any of the scroll sawed ones with me, but instead of being round on the outside here, the scroll, it'd be basically square with corners on it. It was completely cut on the scroll saw. So then I got to think, well, you can do other things. I saw some scroll sawers have done 3D where you have on one profile you have one image, and on another profile you have a different image. Well, I thought, well, what about letters? Well, if you try to do that with the letters with a solid block of wood, the letter on the front side would be correct, but the letter on the back side would be reversed. So I come up with the same idea of cutting it into quadrants and putting letters on, like my initial, my wife's initial, and having it on an ornament where you have your two initials on the ornament. Migrated to this size block of wood, which is a finished size of 2 1/4 inches with 1 1/8 inch individual quarter pieces. And I was able to scroll saw that very cleanly. And I thought, well, what about if I just made a larger scroll saw pattern? And what that would allow me to do then is to make a larger scroll saw, completely scroll sawed with the exterior profile scroll sawed, and I could cut it on a much thicker block of wood than what you could from a solid block of wood. So that turned into the patterns here of just making a larger, basically the same pattern as this, only larger to fit the 2 1/4 inch size block of wood. That just ends up with a larger ornament. The ornaments that you get on with the published ones comes out with about 1.5 inches, which is fairly small. These patterns here, if you do that on a completely scroll sawed ornament, it would be about 1.5 inches in profile, which is kind of small, or this one would come up with a bit larger ornament. So that's what we're going to cover in this series of videos. There's going to be a video on I used a CAD program called Delta CAD to create the patterns. We're going to have a video on how going through the steps of creating those patterns using Delta CAD. You could use any other CAD programs, but I had the Delta CAD, which we got a good discount price here when we did a club purchase on it, and it's a very, very user-friendly CAD program. And then there's going to be another segment on the scroll sawing part of attaching the pattern to the paper, scroll sawing it out, either stopping to do it for the lathe or completely finishing it with the exterior profile scroll sawed. And then a third segment is going to be finishing on the lathe and doing the exterior profile on the lathe. That's it for this introduction part. If you're interested in other videos, like I say, there's going to be 3 videos. Please watch them, and thank you for watching our videos.